Susan was a little too needy for him, and that he was not ready for a commitment, especially not to a woman with 2 young children. He'd ended their relationship 1 week earlier. On the way to the lake that night, Susan had driven by the Winn-Dixie, the local supermarket where David worked as an assistant manager. She passed the road that led to Judy and Carol Cathcart's daycare center, where Michael and Alexander played on swing sets and gazed out at the cows grazing in the nearby field. She went by Veterans Park, where she occasionally took her sons to feed breadcrumbs to the ducks in the pond. She drove by Conso, the decorative trimmings factory where she worked as a secretary. She wasn't far from the homes of her mother and stepfather, Linda and Bev, and her brother, Scotty, and his wife, Wendy. They were places and people she once cared about. But now, there was nothing. Only emptiness and pain. The losses in her life had finally numbered too many. She'd felt the sting of rejection from too many men. The responsibilities of motherhood overwhelmed her. She wondered if death would relieve the ache inside her. Susan Smith looked out at the blackness of the lake, and it was a blackness that consumed her. She wanted relief, a respite from the misery, the loneliness. She would take them with her, those sweet little ones in the back seat. They would suffer less with her, she believed, than left on their own in a compassionless world without her. But something inside her prevented Susan from surrendering herself to the blackness. Standing at the lake that night, she discovered she didn't want to die. All she wanted was to break from the heavy burden she felt so overwhelmed her. For a moment, nothing else mattered, not even the love Susan had for her children. In that instant, Susan Lee Vaughn Smith, whom everyone would later recall as a pretty, intelligent, popular, church-going young lady, made the decision that would catapult her into a worldwide spotlight, an odious decision that she would relive again and again. All the innocence of childhood ended in a moment. Susan reached inside the car and somehow resisted the soft, guileless faces of her little boys. She alone knows if she said goodbye. What she did next is what will never be forgotten or understood. Susan Smith pressed the head of the Mazda's emergency brake and gently lowered the handle down. As the car began to roll, Susan gave the door a push. It slammed shut, sealing the protégé and the fate of Michael and Alexander Smith with a hollow thud. If Susan Smith stood at the shore of the lake and watched, she likely saw the car drift into John D. Long Lake. Because it entered the dark water slowly, it didn't submerge immediately. For a few minutes, it seemed as if it would just remain there, bobbing endlessly, peacefully. But, of course, it could not. And as the burgundy Mazda gradually filled with the water from John D. Long Lake, the trust of a mother's heart drowned. But now, it was too late for regrets. Standing on the banks of the lake, Susan Smith made her next tortured choice: self-preservation. She turned her back on the sinking car and began to run up the road, screaming. The lights of a small house flickered in front of her. The story she was about to tell would kindle the sympathy of a nation. It would raise doubts in some and bruise a community that prided itself on racial harmony. And it would introduce to the world the faces of 2 little boys and mobilize a vigorous search to bring them safely home. When the truth was at last revealed, the world would imagine what happened the night Susan Smith took the lives of her children, replaying the scene at the lake in Union, South Carolina, in their minds again and again. Worst of all, both those who knew Michael and Alexander Smith and those who had never met them